Have you ever wondered what someone would say if they finally had the courage to explain why they left? There are moments in life that define us, moments when silence is louder than words, and absence becomes a permanent echo in our hearts. I was 10 years old the day he walked out. No note, no goodbye, just the fading sound of footsteps and a door that never opened again. They say time heals, but they never tell you what to do with the questions that stay behind. I spent years trying to fill the silence he left. I searched for meaning in birthdays without calls, holidays without visits, and milestones he never saw. I crafted excuses in my mind. Maybe he was sick, maybe something happened, maybe he just forgot how to come back. But deep inside, I always knew he chose not to be there. This isn't just another story. This is about the letter that changed the meaning of everything I thought I knew. A letter I wasn't supposed to find. A message that was hidden for nearly 2 decades. And when I opened it, I didn't just read his words. I felt every piece of pain, regret, and truth that had been buried for years. This channel was born for stories like this, for letters never sent, words never spoken, for hearts that waited in silence, and for those still searching for closure. Because sometimes, what we never received is exactly what we needed most. When I first held that envelope in my hands, I thought it was nothing, just another piece of the past. But when I saw my name written in that familiar handwriting, everything inside me shifted. The weight of years came rushing back, and 1,000 emotions I'd kept buried rose to the surface. My hands shook, my heart raced, because part of me hoped, and part of me feared what I was about to read. I had so many reasons not to open it. Anger, hurt, fear of being disappointed again. But curiosity, no, something deeper, something like hope, made me read it. And that decision changed me forever. If you've ever been left with no answers, if you've ever whispered why into an empty room, this story might feel like yours. And if you stay with me, I'll read you every word he wrote. Not just because it gave me answers, but because maybe, just maybe, it will give you something too. There's a part of this letter I haven't told anyone yet. Something that still keeps me up at night. A truth he shared that I wasn't ready for. But you'll hear it. Because this story deserves to be told exactly as it happened. And what came next? I wasn't ready for it. You won't be either. So I sat there holding that letter. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel abandoned. I felt human, seen, like someone had finally acknowledged the pain I had carried for so long in silence. The words on that page weren't perfect, but they were real. And real was enough. Because sometimes, we don't need an apology wrapped in the right words. We just need to know we weren't forgotten. I don't know what you're carrying today. Maybe you're still waiting for a letter that will never come. Maybe your wound doesn't have a name. Maybe you've never told anyone how deep it goes. But right now, in this moment, I want you to know, you're not invisible. This space we're building here is not just about stories. It's about people. People who have felt the kind of pain no one sees. And if you're one of them, I want to invite you to do something bold, something sacred. If you're carrying something heavy, write a short prayer in the comments below, or just type the word prayer. You don't need to explain. You don't need to be strong. Just let it out. Let us carry that weight with you. Because we're not just telling stories here. We're building a community that prays together, that heals together, that reminds each other, you are not alone. And if this story spoke to something inside you, take a moment to like this video. Not for me, but so that YouTube can show it to someone else who needs it right now. Someone who's sitting in the dark, wondering if anyone else feels what they feel. And if you haven't yet, subscribe, not just to follow a channel, but to walk with us through letters that were never meant to be forgotten, through stories that were never meant to be silenced, through truth that deserves to be heard. Because what comes next in this letter might change everything you thought you knew about love, loss, and what it means to forgive. I waited 18 years for a goodbye that never came. Then one day, I opened a drawer and found the letter that changed everything. He left without a word. No explanation, no goodbye, just silence. I was 10. I still remember the way the door clicked shut and the way my world split in half. The echo of that silence followed me into every room I entered after that, into every question I never got to ask, into every version of myself I had to become, just to survive the emptiness he left behind. Growing up without answers doesn't just hurt, it rewrites you. It turns you into a storyteller of your own pain, inventing reasons why you were never enough. You begin to wonder if you were too loud, or too soft, too needy, or too invisible. You start to believe that maybe, just maybe, it was your fault they left, that somehow the absence wasn't just a choice, it was a response to something you did. And so, I grew into my silence. I mastered the art of pretending I didn't care, but it haunted me. Every Father's Day, every school play, every single time I had to write NA next to the emergency contact form. People ask, why do letters matter? But they don't understand. A letter isn't just ink on paper. It's a voice frozen in time. It's a version of someone who didn't have the courage to say it out loud. It's the echo of what could have been said, but wasn't. And sometimes that's all a child wants. Not closure, not explanation, just the sound of being remembered. The letter I found wasn't addressed with a date. It was sealed in an old envelope, buried beneath tax files and broken pens. But the moment I saw my name on it, my heart stopped. That handwriting, I hadn't seen it in almost 2 decades, and yet I recognized it instantly. Isn't it strange how pain carves itself into memory like that? I sat in silence for minutes, maybe hours, just holding it. My hands trembled, my breath shortened. I didn't know if I had the strength to read it. What if it made things worse? What if it proved everything I feared was true, that I really wasn't worth staying for? But part of me still hoped. That's the thing about unresolved trauma. No matter how long it sleeps, it never truly dies. It waits for a sound, a scent, a name, a letter. And so, I opened it. I won't lie to you and say the words were beautiful. They weren't. They were messy, broken, unfinished, like the person who wrote them, like me. He didn't say, I'm sorry. He didn't say, I wish I had stayed. But he said something I never expected to hear. I was afraid of becoming the man I saw in the mirror. That one sentence shifted something in me. Not because it justified anything, but because it was the first time he stopped hiding. For a man who built his life on disappearing, writing that took courage. And for me, reading it, took forgiveness I didn't know I had left. He talked about shame, about not knowing how to love, about running because staying felt like failing. He said he watched my life from a distance, always wondering if I would ever forgive him. I don't know if he deserved forgiveness, but I do know this. I needed to forgive, just to breathe again. That letter didn't bring him back, but it gave me something else. Peace. Not the kind you get from answers. The kind you get from release, from choosing to stop bleeding over wounds you didn't cause. And now, I ask you something deeply personal. If someone left your life without saying goodbye, if you're still holding on to the silence they left behind, would you be willing to let it go? Would you dare to forgive someone, not because they deserve it, but because you do? If this story touched something inside you, if you ever felt abandoned, silenced, or forgotten, I want you to write just 4 words in the comments. I still remember. Let's speak for those who never got to. Let's write what was never written, because this is how we heal, together. There were no birthdays after that didn't hurt. No holiday that felt complete. I watched other kids run to their dads after school, and I always looked away, because I didn't have one to run to. I stopped making Father's Day cards in 2nd grade. I stopped believing someone would show up for me. I stopped asking why out loud, but inside the question screamed every single day. For a while, I told myself stories. Maybe he was in a car accident and had lost his memory. Maybe he was in another country, working a job that wouldn't let him call. Maybe he was sick. Maybe he wasn't allowed to come back. The human mind will create anything to protect the heart. I became a master at building stories out of nothing. Stories that helped me survive, but also quietly destroyed me. Because deep down, I always knew the truth. He chose not to be there. That realization, when it hit, wasn't sudden. It didn't come like a lightning strike. It crept in slowly, the way pain does when you stop numbing it. I remember the first time I admitted it to myself. I was 13. I had just won a school award. Everyone else had someone clapping for them, recording videos, hugging them with pride. I had a teacher smile and pat my shoulder, and that was it. That's when I knew. No one was coming for me. I carried that silence into my teenage years like a second skin. I didn't let people get close. I didn't want anyone to see the part of me that felt rejected, abandoned, not enough. Emotional abandonment doesn't always show up in bruises. Sometimes it shows up in the way you stop celebrating yourself, in the way you minimize your victories because there's no one to share them with, in the way you stop expecting love because you assume you're not the kind of person people stay for. There's a kind of grief no one talks about, the grief of missing someone who's still alive. The grief of knowing they could have picked up the phone, written a letter, showed up, but didn't. That kind of grief doesn't get sympathy. It gets silence. Because how do you explain mourning someone who simply walked away? Years went by. I graduated, got a job, built a life. But that part of me, the part still waiting at the window, wondering if he'd ever come back, never fully disappeared. I think we all carry that one open wound that time doesn't close.
For me, it was always the same question. Why didn't he want me? And then, the letter. That one fragile envelope hidden in an attic drawer shattered everything and somehow also began to piece it back together. It made me revisit every unanswered question, every ache I tried to bury, every night I stared at the ceiling wondering what I did wrong. It brought me back to the child who waited, who hoped, who believed he was the reason love walked away. And that's the cruelest lie emotional trauma teaches us, that love is earned, and if someone leaves, it's because we failed to earn it. I spent years learning how to look strong, how to pretend I didn't care. But reading that letter, it stripped all of that away. I wasn't 13 anymore. I wasn't the quiet teenager pretending he was fine. I was someone's son. And I was finally reading something that proved I had always been someone's son. He never said goodbye. But this letter was the closest thing I'd ever get. And maybe, just maybe, it was the only thing I ever needed. But what he wrote next, I wasn't ready for it. And I don't think you will be either. 2 weeks ago, I went back to my aunt's house. I hadn't been there in years. It still smelled the same. Old wood, faint perfume, and something else I couldn't name. Something like memory. We were just cleaning out the attic. Dust covered everything like time itself had forgotten those boxes. There were school notebooks, faded photos, old clothes, and a stack of books piled in a broken trunk. She handed me a Bible and said, "That was your father's." I didn't think much of it at first. I held it with care, like it still had something to say. The cover was cracked, the pages stiff. I started flipping through out of habit, maybe hoping to find a bookmark or a note scribbled in the margins. Instead, I found an envelope, a yellowed, brittle envelope tucked neatly between the pages of Psalms. And there it was, my name, written in handwriting I hadn't seen in almost 20 years. I froze. The attic went silent. Everything around me faded. It was like the world held its breath. I thought it was a mistake, a cruel coincidence, or some forgotten school project. But something in me knew better. This wasn't random. This letter had waited. It had hidden itself until it knew I was ready. I didn't open it right away. My fingers hovered over the seal, my heart pounding so hard it drowned out every sound in that room. I remembered his voice, blurry and distant. I remembered the sound of him leaving. And now, here he was, inside an envelope, about to speak again after all these years. And then I read the first line. If you're reading this, it means I wasn't brave enough to say it out loud. I had to sit down. It hit me harder than I expected. I didn't know whether to cry or tear it apart. Because after everything he didn't say, here he was, finally saying something. I read that line over and over again, hoping it would explain everything, hoping it would fill the void. The pages weren't full. There were maybe 10 lines in total, short, scattered, like someone who wanted to say so much but didn't know how to begin. But in every word, I felt him. Not the man who left, the man who couldn't face himself. He wrote about shame, about not being good enough, about waking up every day with the fear that he had already ruined everything. And then he said something that shattered me. I watched your life from a distance. I saw your first day of school. I saw the trophies, the heartbreak, the growth. You were always more than I deserved. I didn't even know he knew those things. How could he have seen me? Who told him? Was he following me from the shadows, too ashamed to speak, but too broken to stay away completely? The letter didn't explain why he left, but it explained something deeper, why he couldn't come back. And that answer, though painful, was honest. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most
are also the most haunted by what they've done. He never apologized in the way I wanted. He never said, "I'm sorry I left," but every word in that letter felt like a man on his knees, finally saying the words his pride wouldn't let him speak. It wasn't closure in the traditional sense, but it was something else. A crack in the wall I had built for years. A moment of light in a room I thought would always be dark. And I wonder now, if he had given me this letter earlier, would I have been ready to read it? I still don't know, but I do know this. Some letters don't come when you want them. They come when you need them, when the silence is too loud, when the ache has settled into your bones, when the truth can finally be heard without rage. I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly, not for me, but for you. Would you open a letter from someone who abandoned you? If the answer is yes, or even maybe, write the words, "I would open it," in the comments below. Because some stories are written not just to be read, but to set someone free. The letter wasn't perfect, but it was real. And sometimes, real is the only thing that heals. It wasn't written on expensive paper. It wasn't long. But the truth it carried weighed more than any goodbye I could have heard face to face. He didn't dress up the pain. He didn't try to make himself look better. He didn't ask to be forgiven. And maybe that's what made it believable. His words didn't sound like someone trying to justify the past. They sounded like a man who finally ran out of places to hide. "I didn't leave because of you," he wrote. "I left because of me. I didn't know how to be the man you deserved." I read that line again, then again, and again. Because for almost 2 decades, I had convinced myself that I was the reason he disappeared, that I wasn't lovable enough, that if I had done something different, smiled more, cried less, been easier to raise, maybe he would have stayed. But that one sentence cracked the foundation of all the stories I'd told myself. He wrote about fear, how he looked at his own father and saw a legacy he didn't want to repeat, how shame had taken root in him early, shame from failing, shame from never feeling like enough, shame from the way he broke every promise he made to himself. And when he looked at me, all he saw was the pressure to become what he didn't believe he could be. He said he tried to write that letter 100 times, that every birthday he pulled out a piece of paper and started. And every time he folded it up, unfinished, and put it away. Not because he didn't care, but because caring made him feel like a fraud. Because love, to him, had become something he wasn't allowed to feel anymore. Then came the line I wasn't ready for, the line that broke me in a way I didn't expect. "I never stopped loving you. I just didn't know how to show it." I didn't even realize I was crying until the tears hit the paper. It was the kind of cry that doesn't come from sadness, but from release, from truth finally landing after years of carrying the weight of silence. Those words didn't erase the pain. They didn't make up for the years he missed, but they gave me something I never knew I needed. Proof that I wasn't forgotten, that my story mattered, that I wasn't the one who failed. You see, we talk a lot about forgiveness as if it's something we owe to others. But sometimes, forgiveness is what we owe ourselves. Forgiveness that says, "I don't have to carry this anymore. I don't have to keep reopening the wound just to make sure it still hurts. I don't have to keep asking questions that were never mine to answer." This wasn't just an unsent letter. It was a doorway, a mirror, a reckoning. Every word gave me back a piece of the voice I had lost in childhood. Every confession gave me permission to breathe again. I wasn't the mistake. I wasn't the reason. I was just the child caught in the fallout of someone else's war. And when I looked at that last page, I didn't see a man begging for forgiveness. I saw a man holding out a small, fragile hope that somehow this letter would make it to me, that it would speak where he couldn't, that it would reach the son he left behind. I folded the letter slowly, my hands trembling like they had when I first found it. It felt like touching a ghost. And in that moment, I whispered something I hadn't said in almost 20 years. "I forgive you." But not because he asked, because I finally could. And then, there was one more sentence. One more truth I never expected to see. Something so raw, so vulnerable. It shook me to the core. And it changed the way I saw not just him, but myself. The letter didn't bring him back. It didn't undo the years of silence, or fill the empty chairs at school events, birthdays and graduations. It didn't erase the ache that built a home in my chest. And it didn't change the fact that, for 18 years, I lived without hearing his voice, without knowing what went wrong, without having the closure I once begged for. But it did something else. It gave meaning to the pain. It took what had been a silent, open wound and turned it into a scar still visible, yes, but one that no longer bled when touched. It allowed me to stop living in the past and start breathing in the present. For so long I was stuck in a loop, trying to rewrite a story that never made sense, trying to make peace with a ghost that had never said goodbye. But now, I had something real, something tangible, something that said, you were seen, you were thought of, you were not forgotten. There's power in words, even the ones that come too late. Sometimes, the words we think we needed years ago don't lose their strength when they finally arrive. They just hit differently. They become a bridge between who we were and who we're finally ready to become. Reading that letter gave me something I never expected. Permission. Permission to let go, to forgive. Not just him, but myself, for the anger, for the questions, for the years I spent wondering if I was unlovable, if I had failed him somehow. And that's when I realized something important. Forgiveness isn't about saying what happened was okay. It's about refusing to carry someone else's guilt as your own. It's about releasing yourself from a story that was never yours to write, only to survive. And that's what this channel is about. Not about perfect stories, but about unfinished ones. About moments that never got their ending. About people who left, and the words that remained. About grief that lingers in silence, and letters that echo louder than any goodbye ever could. Maybe you're still waiting for a letter. Maybe you've written one you'll never send. Maybe the person who hurt you will never explain why they did. But you deserve peace, even if they never come back. You deserve to stop bleeding for what someone else broke. And you deserve to tell your story, even if it ends with you standing alone. If this letter found you in a place of pain, maybe it's time to write your own. Not for them, for you. Write the words you needed to hear. Say the things you never got to say. Speak into the silence that's been screaming inside you for far too long. Because letters, even the ones never sent, are more than words. They are acts of release. They are pieces of our truth we're finally brave enough to let go of. And in letting go, we find healing. Not all at once, but one line at a time. Tomorrow, I'm going to share a different kind of story. One that caught me completely off guard. I found a letter hidden in a drawer, and it wasn't meant for me. I wasn't supposed to read it, but I did. And what I found inside changed the way I see my family, forever. So, if you've been walking through this story with me, I hope you stay for the next one. Because what's coming might just show you that sometimes the truth we stumble upon by accident is the truth we needed all along. If this story touched your soul, if it made you feel seen, if it brought back memories you thought you'd buried, I want you to write just 3 words in the comments. I needed this. Not just for me, for you. For someone scrolling who's afraid to feel something today. For someone who needs a sign they're not alone. Because stories heal, but only when we share them. If you're still watching this right now, it means something inside you resonated. Maybe a memory surfaced. Maybe a feeling you've tried to ignore finally had space to breathe. Maybe, just maybe, you needed this story in a way you didn't even realize. This is more than a video. It's a mirror. And if this story opened something in you, don't let it close in silence. Subscribe to this channel, not just to follow a series, but to walk alongside stories that were never supposed to stay hidden. Here we speak what others bury. We honor what was left unsaid. And we believe in the healing power of words, even the ones that arrive too late. If you stayed until the very end, I want to hear from you. Write the words, "I was here until the end," in the comments. Let that be your voice among others who were moved. Let someone scrolling see your words and realize they're not alone either. And if this story truly reached you, if even one sentence stayed with you, leave a like, not for numbers, but to push this story into someone else's hands. Because somewhere out there, another person is living in silence, and this video might be the moment that breaks it. Now, if you're ready for what comes next, click on the video that just appeared on your screen. The next letter wasn't meant for me. It wasn't even supposed to be found, but it was, and what it revealed changed the way I see my entire family. Some stories you search for, others find you. And this next one is waiting.